Jean Grey's clone gets her own gallery spotlight. Here's your look at the new Diamond Select. This is the gallery statue of the Goblin Queen. In an alternate reality, Madeline Pryor gains sonic abilities through a deal with the demons of Limbo, leading her to turn to darkness and take the name the Goblin Queen. Purging her evil side during the Inferno Crisis, she took the name Marvel Woman and joined the X-Men, eventually leaving with her husband Alex Havoc Summers to form the Six. But her dark side returned time and again, bringing danger to those she loved the most. This PVC diorama of the Goblin Queen is based on her appearance in the Marvel comic Mutant X and is made of high-quality grade plastic. It features detailing, sculpting, and paint applications. The statue was designed by Uriel Caton and sculpted by Sam Greenwell. Before we get to looking at the Goblin Queen statue, this one I'm very excited for, we're first going to figure out how tall the statue, the gallery statue of Jean Grey's clone stands. Taking the tape measure, putting it at the very top of her head, or what I believe to be at the very top of her head right there, and reading the readout to you, the members of the mob, I can tell you that the gallery statue of the Goblin Queen stands rather impressively at 10.7 inches in height. How does that translate to centimeters? Yells somebody from the back of the audience. I can see you. You're hiding behind somebody, but I can still see you. You're the one with the very large mustache. It stands out like a sore thumb. Anyways, to answer your question, sir, or it could be somebody in disguise. It could be a cat for all I know. According to the readouts, according to centimeters, and according to what I'm telling you, 27.3. Almost 27.5 centimeters tall. I would also like to send out a big thank you to the folks over at Diamond Select who were nice enough to provide the sample that we're having a look at in this review. Madeline Pryor, one of my kind of secret crushes, I have to admit, growing up, was a statue I was very much looking forward to getting in hand. Something about this particular character and Mr. Sinister has some real strong roots in my old comic reading days. Madeline Pryor first debuted in Uncanny X-Men 168, which I actually think I still have kicking around somewhere. I didn't sell all of my comics, mind you. I was smart enough to keep some of them. And I think that was one of the comics that I kept. As for the base, we're going to start first there. Obviously, that's the place that we're looking at here in the camera. The first thing we're going to look at is this really neat-looking display base. Fitting to the title of the Goblin Queen, it appears to be a goblin. That is my guess. It's a goblin. A rather cool green-looking goblin. It kind of looks a little bit like the Abomination. A little bit. It's small, it's ghoulish, and as you can see, it's got the tongue sticking out. I really like the sculpting that they put into that. The airbrushing of the additional gray certainly adds a little bit extra pizzazz to it, so it's not simply just the swamp green. I also like the coloring of the eyes on this particular one as well. It seems to be holding preciously this skull in front of him. Maybe it's like Golem. This is his precious. He needs to strive further beyond skulls. There's a lot more vast wealths and riches out there, my ghoulish goblin friend. Maybe don't spend so much time looking at holding on to this one particular skull, but that seems to be what he's grabbed his tendons, his fingers around, his little digits. There's also a skull right here, which apparently he doesn't have as much interest in. Both are also exquisitely painted with what seems dry brushing. Doesn't seem like it's airbrushed on there. They've speckled on some additional dark brown coloring. And I like the color also that they incorporate into the teeth. I say his teeth, it could have been really her teeth, or it could even be an owl for all I know. The base The bottom section here is kind of a rock facing with some nice little puffs of smoke sticking up for ambiance. The ambience of the smoke is done in a translucent, in case you just didn't believe me. I try to be as honest with you guys as possibly can. It is translucent, you can see by me running my hand behind it. It's a clear plastic, but it's not all clear plastic. Obviously down below here and closer to the base bottom, it gets a little bit more smokier. And that seems to be the case with all three puffs of smoke, which are all unique to one another. This one kind of looks like it has a little face, little eyes, nose. Kind of looks like a caterpillar puff of smoke. And you can see there's the tops, or I guess the heels of Madeline Pryor right there. And again, just really neat looking display base. The actual goblin himself does have a little bit of pliability to him. I mean, this is obviously PVC plastic that they've utilized. Speaking of PVC plastic, we can tip the base upside down to kind of show you how the inner workings work. Obviously, nobody in their right mind is going to be displaying the statue like this, but I feel a service that I'm more than happy to provide is to show you guys what the underside of the base looks like. And that is what the underside of the base looks like. One of the other reasonings I'm certain as to why I like this statue so much, that's not the reasoning, is because this was during the heyday, at least the Goblin Queen was during the heyday of my heavily into collecting X-Men comics. Heavily also collecting the X-Men and Marvel trading cards, which, if Goblin Queen at least looks familiar, maybe not so much the name, but certainly looks familiar, you probably can still go if you have a collection readily available. You can flip through the pages of your trading cards from Marvel and probably find a couple of cards that have the Goblin Queen featured on the front. One of the ones that stand out to me was the Marvel Universe, I think was from 1992, in which she is standing in the Marvel Inferno trading card, which is kind of like standing in the background, and there's all these characters at her feet. She was also part of the team affiliations of the Hellfire Club, which also was one of the things that I remember the most about Madeline Pryor Summers. The face sculpt is really quite stunning. I really have to tip my hat to Diamond Select for the paint job that they were able to incorporate into Madeline's face. It is really quite stunningly pretty, and yet still eerily creepy as well. I think the paint, especially around the eyes, is what I do want to draw your attention to. You can see in the corners, I wanted to put my fingers right there, and I certainly didn't want to block those eyes off completely. In the corners of the eyes, they're slightly a darker green. In the middle section, they're a lighter shade of yellow. It's this two-tone effect that almost adds to the comic element of this particular gallery statue. Specifically, I also like the fact that they gave her dark lip gloss lipstick. And you can see also that they've got the visible teeth showing there as well. The fact that she doesn't have pupils is not really a detractor to me. In fact, it's one of the things I actually quite like about this particular statue, because it does feel like it was pulled from the comic pages. Certainly also could be pulled from the comic pages as perhaps the type of attire that they've got her in. This attire is actually quite similar to many of the cards depicting the Goblin Queen, which I think at one point she had like a skirt or something instead of the leggings. But like the top has pretty much stayed consistent, with a few additional spirals of gold being added to her arms here. It's a really nice purple that they went with. It almost has like an iridescent coloring to it, where iridescent basically is with light hitting a color a certain way. One time it may look like a blue, whereas if you look at it again on a different angle, it might come across more like purple. It clearly is more metallic purple than it is metallic blue, but it definitely does fool the eye when you're looking at certain angles. I really, again, love the spiraling of gold that they incorporated on it. She's got, of course, the strap there of gold that runs from the two ends of her top together. That's barely enough to hold that top in place, mind you. If you spin it around, she's got this tattered, short cape, which is really a nice touch. It's not quite the same color as the rest of the outfit, so it does a good job of actually breaking up the consistent purple that pretty much makes its way all the way down to her high heels. I don't even know how tight a dress or outfit could be like this. It certainly does look like it's just simply been painted onto her body. If you look at the cape, though, the cape is almost done in a glittery blue. It's really a nice coloring that they chose for that. Actually, as a whole, I'm really happy with the coloring that they chose for the statue's outfit. It's this metallic purple I'm really loving quite a bit. On the side, we've got some additional deco added to the side legging. I say leggings, not plural, because it's not on this side right here. And I don't know how this is possible, but the outfit goes right into her high heel shoes. I guess she just slips them on and the high heels are attached to the leggings. I'm spending a lot of time diagnosing and dissecting how this could possibly work out. I guess I should probably just be enjoying the statue for what it is. The paint on it is actually quite clean. I don't have any paint issues. The hair itself, I'm not as thrilled, I have to admit, with the coloring, what they went with the hair here. The orange color works, but it's this additional lighter yellow that almost looks as if the paint's worn off a little bit. I probably would have maybe gone a slightly darker shade. Maybe instead of using yellow or this light gold color, I probably would have swapped that out for a darker shade of this color right here. The box artwork actually will depict, and has depicted, this hair being a slightly darker shade of coloring. And I kind of wish that the physical statue in hand could have carried over that same color scheme of the really dark orange and this kind of dark reddish color they've got in the kind of dark areas, recessed areas of her hair. Here it's actually just more of a lighter color of orange, and again you've got these little bands, these little hairlings of gold. It's not bad, but I think I would have preferred the coloring that they would have gone with on the back of the box instead. Another part of the paint application I really like is in the skin tone. The skin tone generally is quite pale if you look at it. One thing that they did to balance that out by adding some additional airbrushing of a darker shade of that same skin tone. It does a good job of bringing out some of the details on this particular statue that I think if they kept only to the pale color, I think it would have really bleached and washed out the detailing on this particular sculpt. By adding those little subtle nuances, by adding that additional shading there, it really does bring some extra warmth to an otherwise cold type of character. I might be a bit biased, bitten perhaps by nostalgia for liking this particular statue. I might like it a little bit more than the next guy. This was during the real heyday of me collecting X-Men comics. And around that same time period, it was during the heyday in which I was heavily into collecting Marvel cards. Both the Marvel trading cards and the X-Men comics I was collecting during that time happened to be a big spotlighting time period for not only, of course, the Goblin Queen, but also Mr. Sinister, who happens to also be a recently looked at gallery statue that Diamond Select has released, and also happens to be another gallery statue that I really quite liked. Again, I could be a little bit bitten by nostalgia for this, but I'm really happy with how the Goblin Queen here turned out. I always find it intriguing to talk to various collectors out there on the internet, or to a finer degree, collectors that also produce video content. You really do get varying opinions and perspectives of certain collectibles. You'll have one person that really is heavily into X-Men, for example, and you'll talk to somebody else, and they don't really care for X-Men at all. And that is really the fun thing that comes from collecting, is the opportunity to be able to talk to collectors and get their perspective on why they like a specific thing. The reasoning why I'm saying all of this in final looks is because the gallery statue release here of Goblin Queen evokes an itch I had the earlier days of collecting comics. Right around the time period that I was following the exploits of the Goblin Queen, the Hellfire Club, and Mr. Sinister was heavily during the time that I was into collecting comics, bringing comics to school. And don't worry, I wasn't reading them during class. I might have snuck a few sneak peeks at pages, but most of the time I was generally reading them during recess, hanging out with friends after school, or even during lunch while I was eating a sandwich. I was probably flipping through the pages of my most recent pickup of an X-Men comic. This is where I really remember the Goblin Queen, and I also really remember her also from the old days of collecting Marvel comic cards. Yes, the comic cards, which I think a lot of people probably collected back in the day. One of the things I still have, actually enough, in my collection. Of all the things I've sold and parted ways with, my figures, some of my comics, a good chunk of my comics, my trading cards are still something I have from the original comic cards that I had back in the day. I've never got rid of them, and I can't see myself even really getting rid of them either. When I look at a character like the Goblin Queen, it evokes all those memories. It may not evoke those same similar memories with the next guy, the next girl, the next owl, or the next zombie, but that's the fun thing about collecting, is the fact that you do get a chance to talk to people that have different opinions. And we don't really all want to have the same opinions. I love the Goblin Queen. I think she's presented perfectly and beautiful and eerie in a way that I remember the way that she looked in the comics and some of my various trading cards. The next guy may not like the Goblin Queen. And again, that's the beauty of companies like Diamond Select releasing various statues and action figures based on characters one guy may like, one girl may like, and somebody else may not like at all. If you grew up in the day of collecting comics, the early 90s like I did, you'll probably remember her, or at the very least, you remember a character looking like this. No doubt if you still have your comics and those trading cards from back in the day and you start flipping through a lot of them, you may stumble across the Goblin Queen or Madeline Pryor Summers in a few pages or a few different trading cards. And then you'll be like, ah yeah, I remember that one. I remember Goblin Queen. Probably looking exactly like this. I think if anything, she's probably got more clothing now than she did back then. Top's about the same. I don't think she was always wearing pants like this. I think it was like a skirt or something like that. But either way, make a long story short, or in this case, a short story long. Let me know down below in the comment section what you guys think of the new Diamond Select Gallery statue release of the PVC diorama Goblin Queen. I really, really like this one. You may not. And then, again, that's the fun in collecting various different collectibles and being able to talk to various different collectors. We all have different opinions. A big thank you, by the way, to the folks over at Diamond Select, who were very nice enough to send this sample my way. If you are interested in picking this one up for yourself, the Marvel Gallery statue release of Goblin Queen is available right now in comic book stores. If you are new to this channel or a longtime viewer, maybe you never got around to it, that's okay. Maybe you're too busy reading old vintage comics. I don't blame you. I would have probably done the exact same thing. Make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Periodically swing on over to the home page and just see if there's any videos that you may have missed along the way. There's going to be a whole bunch of Diamond Select, specifically as well, gallery statue reviews coming up soon, so keep your peepers peeled for that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.